Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Do you sometimes feel a bit ambivalent about museums constantly defining visitors into specific groups and categorizing them and boxing them? Because I have to say, as an interpretation person, I do, and I'm beginning to think that maybe time has come for museums and heritage sites to stop actually grouping visitors and defining them, and especially defining them in detail, and maybe start to look at other ways of engaging people and actually reaching out. This is some of the things I would like to talk about in this video. If you like the content of these videos, then please subscribe to the channel, like the videos and add your comments. It would be lovely to hear about your perspectives and your experiences as well. Now, first of all, I wanted to just very quickly go through a few of all these many visitor definitions and theories about grouping visitors. You will have seen a lot of them, especially if you study museum studies or interpretation. One of the first I came across actually was a Swedish definition by Per-Uno Ågren. I think it was from the mid-90s, where he defined 3 different types of visitors: the knowledge-seeking, the understanding-seeking, and the entertainment-seeking. And the names sort of speak for themselves here. You have the expert, you have the person seeking meaning and relevance, and you have the person seeking entertainment and fun, really. Another way of going about defining visitors is the generation definition. So defining visitors by their age, really, by when they were born and by what sort of influences they grew up with. You all know these as well: the mature generation, the baby boomers, Generation X, Y, M, and there will be many more to come around these as well. If you have been working in the UK a lot, and I think this might apply to other countries as well, you will have come across the culture segments as well. These were defined by Morris, Hargreaves and McIntyre, and there are 8 of them, and they are incredibly detailed described, each of these segments. It's actually also possible for the segments to overlap. So if you belong to one segment, it's possible to have sort of links into some of the other segments as well. If you're interested in knowing more about these, I would recommend you Google culture segments. It's also possible to actually test yourself to see what kind of segment you belong to. They're incredibly well defined, as I said, and a lot of British museums, in my experience, really swear by these and really aim their projects and their storytelling and lots of their exhibition work to a few of these culture segments, depending on what sort of segments they have defined apply to their museums and whoever they want to reach out to, really. Now, I think when it comes to certain projects, it can absolutely make sense to define visitors into certain groups. And I think especially when you are working on educational or learning activities, it can make sense that you know very specifically what sort of age group, for example, you're aiming a learning activity towards, or if you're trying to link to a specific school curriculum, for example, it can make absolute sense to have very well-defined visitor group definitions. And it might also be, if you are creating a very niche storytelling or exhibition, for example, that it makes sense to have a very specific visitor group in mind here. However, I think generally speaking, I'm not sure anymore that it makes sense for a museum to adhere to certain visitor groups so strictly. And one of the reasons for this, I feel, is that you actually tend to leave out certain groups of visitors who might have been really interested in the subject that you are researching and trying to convey. By simply saying, I aim my storytelling only at these specific groups, you are actually leaving others out. And I think there is a danger in that approach at many museum and heritage sites, and in adhering too strictly to certain visitor groups. I think some of the reasons why we should probably stop grouping visitors are, first of all, Hobbies and personal interests are more versatile than ever. One of the reasons for this is that we have access to so many more things in our spare time that we did just half a generation ago. So if I'm interested, for example, in cooking lessons, I can have cooking lessons. At the same time, I can go scuba diving, or I can be members of 3 different book clubs, for example. We have access to so many different things nowadays that it doesn't really make sense to try and put us into just one category based on what we are interested in. Another factor is that the world is more global than it ever was before. We travel more, we connect with many different cultures, and we often don't even have to really travel to engage with other cultures. We can do this from home. We can do it from our own community, from our own neighborhood, really. We can go down to our local Greek or Chinese restaurant. You can learn different cultures and then languages from home. There's so many different ways of getting the world to come to you nowadays. Another thing to remember is that no one really has the same job or the same profession throughout their entire career anymore. You might be working within the same sector, but it's very unlikely that you'll be having the same job. Maybe you'll advance within your sector, maybe you will change profession altogether, and you might start being an employee and end up being a freelancer or having your own company or something like that. So it's very unlikely that you'll be staying within the same group of professionals throughout your entire career. Another thing that seems in constant change is the way we form relationships. People start and end relationships, whether they be private or work-related, more than ever. We interact across generations more than ever. You might be working with children, or you might have colleagues at work who are much older or much younger than you. You might be married, you might not be married, you might have kids of your own, you might not have kids on your own. You might have children in your life that are not yours biologically, but they're part of your family, and so on, which again makes it incredibly difficult to categorize people, because we have so many different social relationships, whether they be private or work related, throughout our entire life. My final argument is that no one really likes to be defined anymore. We want to define ourselves. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't want to belong to certain social groups, because essentially human beings are very much social animals, but we want to decide for ourselves which groups we want to belong to. We change and belong to many different groups all the time, and I think this is an important factor that museums and heritage sites have to take into consideration as well. Maybe what it's time to focus on instead is our own stories and whether or not they are actually interesting. What is it we want to tell with these stories? Is it because they're part of our collection? Is it because we want to reach out and actually create something that's relevant and that gives meaning here? Does the story matter? Why does it matter? It's up to us as heritage organizations, really, to explain why this story matters. Is the story open to new perspectives and viewpoints? Does it offer visitors the opportunity of engaging and participating? And what is it we want to gain or leave behind with this story? Do we want to form some kind of legacy with this story? Because not all projects at museums last for a very long time. We all know about special exhibitions or special activities and so on that might not last for very long. But do we want them or the story to live on? And if so, how do we do that? I think a key factor here for museums really is to reach out and start engaging with visitors from all backgrounds and with many, many different interests. One of the things I have found in especially recent interpretation work is that a story really can be interesting to all sorts of people. Whether it be adults with a very specific area of expertise or interest, or it be very young children who happen to be very keen or interested in a very niche subject, it is possible for museums to actually reach out and to aim their storytelling at so many different people at the same time. And I can't help but think that maybe time now really is due for museums to try a different approach. Instead of adhering so strictly to certain visitor groups, instead try to focus on creating interests and meaning and relevance for as many people as possible through their storytelling and through their collections and their objects. I know this is a little bit of a controversial subject, and I think many museums and museum professionals are still a little bit ambivalent about this and about how to approach this. Let me know what you think, and if you have any experiences in this yourself, it would be lovely to hear.